All right, welcome to this video on how to answer AAMC preview questions. This whole channel really is developed to helping you crush the AAMC preview exam. And the first video I uploaded to this channel was actually about over a month ago. And it was how to answer, it's a very similar video on how to answer AAMC preview questions. However, although it was a fine video, I do think I can make a new video that is a bit more high yield and give you a more detailed explanation of the methodology we developed to help you answer questions on this exam. All right, so if you don't know, the preview test is a situational judgment test where you're given the role of a medical student. And each scenario describes situations you may encounter in medical school, says the AAMC, and some responses to the scenario. So you're given the scenario, and then you're given 4 to 8 responses on what you should do next in the scenario. And you're tasked to rate the effectiveness of the response on a 1 to 4 scale, from very ineffective to very effective. Now, of course, effectiveness is a vague term, right? So the most important information the AAMC gives us on how to differentiate between these answer choices is these definitions below, right? A very ineffective response will cause additional problems or make the situation worse. An ineffective response will not improve the situation or may cause a problem. An effective response could help, but will not significantly improve the situation. And a 4 response or a very effective response will significantly improve the situation. And just so you know, every response is separate. So their effectiveness, even though you have multiple responses for each scenario, the effectiveness of each response should not be rated relative to each other. In short, you can think of each response as a separate question than all the ones from before. So also, it's really important to keep in mind that each response is the immediate next step, right? So you're not gonna make a lot of assumptions, and it's just the response is the immediate next step of how you were to respond to the scenario given. Now, these are still vague definitions, right? Like, what does it really mean to cause additional problems or make the situation worse? And how is that different from not improving the situation or may causing a problem, right? Even between a 3 and a 4, what does it mean that the response could help but will not significantly improve the situation? These are still really, really vague terms, right? So how do you go about differentiating between all these responses? Well, the first really important thing to do is to critically read the question, right? And to get really good at reading the question. Some, important things to think about when you do read the question is pay close attention to the different aspects of each question, such as, what responsibilities do you have in this scenario? Are you working with a partner, or are you working on a team, right? Are you required to hold a discussion? In situations where you have a responsibility attached to maybe your job, or you have a required class or required labs, or you have other personal responsibilities, are you attending those responsibilities? Because fulfilling those responsibilities will be important in the effectiveness of the response, right? Even if you're working on a team, are you able to work in a group, right? How good are your teamwork skills? Are you able to hold discussions with other members and be really open-minded? And when you are required to hold a discussion, right, are you open-minded? Are you not jumping to conclusions? And are you being respectful? These last 2 questions, right? Did you or someone else make a mistake, right? If you broke a rule or were unethical or were rude, are you owning up to that? Are you taking any steps to correct that mistake? And if someone else made a mistake, right? If someone else was suggested to do something unethical or broke a rule or is being rude, are you correcting their actions, right? Also, who are the relevant stakeholders in the question? When you read the scenario, it's a good habit to keep in mind, who are the main actors in this scenario, and how could they be affected by your response, right? And, beyond these questions, these are just some questions to think about, but we really could have a much, much longer list of questions, particularly because, every question is going to be slightly different. So every question is going to have different considerations to keep in mind. And that's why it's so important to read the question really carefully and critically so you can understand what considerations you need to make in developing an effective response, right? All right, so after you read the question, the next really important step is to be cognizant and summarize the central problem or conflict in the question. Maybe you're tasked with holding a discussion, right? And it goes hand in hand with our previous list of questions, but maybe you're tasked with holding a discussion, and that's a central problem that you will have to find a solution for. Maybe someone asked you for help, right? And you gotta find a solution that helps them. Maybe it's two teammates who are arguing and disrupting your study group. This might seem a little obvious that you would have to summarize the central problem, but it can be more insidious than it seems, because if you focus in on the wrong aspects of the question and you don't summarize the problem well, often your responses, you can misrate your responses because you're not looking at what really needs to be solved. And it really is harder than it seems. One quick tip is sometimes you can look at the last sentence of the scenario. That might give you a hint as to maybe what you're tasked to do or what you could be looking for as a good response. Hopefully, as you work through the 30 practice questions and watch the review videos on this channel, you can get a lot of practice on summarizing the main problem, as we'll be doing that for every question we review. All right, so after summarizing the main problem of the question, now we get to kind of the fun stuff. So in short, what we're going to do to get to an answer and answer questions on this exam, what I recommend that y'all do is do a 2-step narrowing down process. So during our initial differentiation, we're going to eliminate 2 questions, right? And how are we going to eliminate 2 questions? Two answer choices, right? We're going to eliminate, you have 4 answer choices from very ineffective, effective, and very effective. The first step is to cross out 2 of them. And how are we going to do that? Well, pretty much, we have this flowchart, and I'll get into it a bit more, but if we just look at our initial differentiations, these are some questions, right, you can ask. Are you fulfilling your responsibilities, right? Are you taking steps to resolve or address the main problem? And how likely is this response to cause a problem or make the situation worse? So how do we get to these 3 questions? And this is not a comprehensive list, right? These are just some of the questions that you could use, but that we found to be quite useful as we went through the 30 questions. Well, how did we get to these questions? We got there because, if you look back at the definitions of each of our responses, one key differentiator between the effective side of the scale and the ineffective side of the scale is if you're helping the situation, right? If you're improving the situation, or if you're causing a problem, or if you're not improving the situation. So, going back to, our questions, if we are fulfilling our responsibilities, right? If we are addressing the main problem, we are likely going to, that's good evidence that we're going to be improving the situation, right? And if you're not, then you're probably not improving the situation. And this third question here, how likely is this to cause a problem or make the situation worse? Also a useful question. To me, the second question here is what I found most useful going through the practice exam and on the exam itself on rating effectiveness. Because if you are addressing the problem, if you're making it better, then you're probably going to be improving the situation or at least helping. So that's just a quick rundown of some questions you could ask, right? Not all of these questions are going to be relevant all the time. And if you have other questions that you find useful, definitely put them in your notes, right? But these are just some of the questions. And even the second question, right? You can tell why it was so important to, in our second step here, to centralize and figure out what the main problem is. Because if you can figure out what the main problem is, and then you can see which responses address that problem, which makes it easier to eliminate answer choices. All right, so we narrowed down, our 4 responses into 2. How do we move on? Well, if you can tell, we're going to narrow down our 2 responses into 1, right? We're going to pick one answer between our 2 responses. So how are we going to do this? Well, similarly, we have a list of questions for differentiating very ineffective or ineffective answers, ineffective or effective answers, and effective and very effective answers, right? We have these questions that we've come up with as we've gone through the practice test. And we particularly did that because, our goal is to understand how the AAMC differentiates between these questions, right? If we can understand how the AAMC differentiates between these questions, if we can build an intuition of how the AAMC defines effectiveness, right? And differentiates between various answers, then we're best poised to do as well as we can on these tests. So these lists of questions are just a way to build that intuition, right? To be able to think through what it means to improve the situation or helping the situation or not improving the situation or making it worse, right? These questions will help guide in that way. Now, the important thing to understand is this is not a comprehensive list of questions, right? This is not all the questions you could ask or potentially even should ask. And why is that? Well, in that vein, don't memorize, these lists, don't memorize these questions. But the reason why is because every question has different considerations. And because each question has different considerations, if we have an infinite amount of scenarios, we would have an infinite amount of unique considerations because every question is a little bit different, right? Therefore, these are just some of the questions you could ask to take a look at what the important considerations are, right? And what the AAMC thinks are the important considerations. And if you use the practice test and this opportunity to build your intuition, we can get into the mind of the AAMC and understand how they constructed this exam and what they define as effective, and that's what's going to allow us to do the best on the real test, right? So once again, if you have more, I'll try to put this in the description. I'll put a link to it. If not, I'll put a PDF to it, hopefully, like a download link. And if you have any other questions you find to be useful as you go through the exam, don't hesitate on putting them, into your own notes, into your own list of differentiators. This is really just a starting place, right? This list is just a starting place to help you to understand how to differentiate between questions. That's pretty much it. Those are the 4 steps. And if you have any further questions or comments, please, let me know in the comment section, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. If you have any trouble with any of the practice questions once you go through the practice exam, check out our channel where we have posted reviews of all the questions on the official practice test using this methodology. I know if you prepare well, then you are going to do great on this test, and I wish you best of luck. And yes, hopefully I will see y'all on one of the review question videos. All right.